Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Walk and Talk. This is a series on my YouTube channel that is completely funded by my patrons on Patreon, where I get a subject to talk about and my patrons tell me what to talk about, and we basically go and walk and we talk about it. Today we're walking and talking about mental health. We're going to talk about my history of mental health, but before we do anything, let's roll the intro. Alright, so today's kind of topic came from one of my longtime patrons, one of my longtime supporters. His name is Torben, and he asked basically what's kind of like my history with mental health, because I mentioned it a little bit in the Meaning of Clat video that just came out recently, and he kind of asked what is my history with it and would I ever potentially do something to help people in the future with it. And I think it's really interesting that he mentioned it, because I actually was planning, ever since I knew I was going to make that Meaning of Clat video, to make a video addressing my mental health, because it's something that I've dealt with before. I also am not 100% sure if YouTube lets you talk about these topics. I'm pretty positive mental health is one of those things that YouTube kind of shuns and demonetizes. So this video will probably get demonetized, but luckily funded by patrons on Patreon, so we don't need to think about that really, which is good. Also, you can see the wonderful location that I'm at right now. It's pretty dope. Any guesses as to where I am? Probably have some. Let's just start walking and talking, shall we? All right, so before this walk and talk kind of officially starts, I wanted to show you guys something that I'm currently dealing with. This thing right here is a heart monitor hooked up to my body currently. Now, before you start freaking out and wondering if I'm okay and if everything's all right, as you can see by the smile on my face, I am 100% fine. I'm a tip-top shape. The heart monitor is something I will address later on in this video. But yeah, my history with these things traces back to when I was 15. If you guys watched that Meaning of Clat video, you'll be able to tell that when I was 15, I suffered from really, really bad acne. It's kind of a genetic thing. My parents had it, and so that was passed down to me, and I had horrible acne, just really, really bad acne that I could not get rid of, and it was all over my body too, so it really was painful. It like really affected my life. And one of the things I did to remedy that is I got on a medicine, and basically what that medicine did is it's like an extreme, like really aggressively attacks the acne in your body, and it gets rid of it pretty successfully. But with that comes a really wide variety of side effects, like a lot of them, and some that are a little extreme. So it's something that I dealt with then, and this is the first time I ever developed any sort of issues with mental health was around that time. One of the side effects that it gave me was it dried out my body, which is kind of the point of it. It kind of dries you out. And with that, it basically caused me to have a lot of nosebleeds and just bleeding around my body in general, because my body was so dry. In addition to that, that medicine also gave you really bad mood swings, and it just messes with your hormones, and it also tends to give people depression or give the onsets of depression. Maybe not fully get depressed, but it definitely makes some people depressed. So for me, this was the first time I was starting to deal with depression. Around the same time, I was developing really horrible social awkwardness and an issue with being social and being around people. And so from that came anxiety as well, and panic attacks, which is something I dealt with back then. And man, this is not easy. It's not an easy topic to talk about. I would have shortness of breath. Around the same time, I also developed a thing called heart palpitations. If you don't know what those are, it's basically when your heart, because of anxiety most of the time, starts skipping a beat. Every once in a while, it'll just skip a beat, and it freaks you out. And when you don't know what it is, it feels like you're having a heart attack, even though it's not a heart attack, and it's not what a heart attack feels like. It's the closest thing your brain can imagine to when you don't know what a heart attack is. So that would happen and freak me out. And I also, because I was very fat at the time, had sleep apnea, which basically made it really hard for me to sleep. And then insomnia came from that, which made it impossible to sleep some nights. So there was this bevy of mental illnesses and physical things that I was going through at the time that were making me very unhappy with my life. That progressed for a while until I kind of got off that medication. It took almost a year. And when I finally got off that medication is when I wanted to get my life back in order. And so I started physically working out. It's also when I discovered kind of the world of travel on YouTube and started watching videos all about travel. And it's kind of a goal that I set in my brain for myself, that one day it's potentially something I'd want to do. And I actively tried to travel as I was in high school, as you guys have seen. If you haven't seen that Meaning of Clat video, it'll give you a lot more context about all of this. So I highly recommend watching it. But yeah, that's one of those things that I started researching and actively trying to better myself. And so throughout that year, the more physically fit I got, the more I started working out. I also started doing yoga and meditating, and trying to work through physically what was going wrong with me and why I was feeling these emotions. I swear to people that travel is the reason I sort of like saved myself. It was partly that and partly the ukulele. As ridiculous as it is, that instrument really did, I feel, save my life, because I was going down a really, really bad path. All right, man, I'm gonna have to take a breather. I'm having a hard time walking and talking while walking on sand. Give me a sec. Let's get to a place to sit down. When I graduated high school, I was definitely in a better mental state. Just a year after all of this that I'm mentioning with the medication that I was taking, I was still, oh shoot, what was that? I was still pretty depressed at that time. And I don't think, I should make a clarification, I don't think I was ever clinically depressed. I wasn't like diagnosed by a doctor to say I was depressed, but all the symptoms of that and the onsets of what was left from the medication in my body very clearly pointed to this was a sort of type of depression. I knew that to get away from these feelings, what I needed to do was travel, because the little travel that I'd done before had really made me feel better. And when I started traveling, I felt like I couldn't have panic attacks. I couldn't have anxiety. I couldn't have those heart palpitations. They just didn't, they disappeared. And I was like, maybe I might be onto something. Maybe this is my medication. Maybe like this is what I need to do. And so I do mention sometimes, and I mentioned this before, that travel for me has been a sort of escapism. Oh my God, oh God, that was a bee. Oh my, I can't believe I have that on camera. That would have been bad. All right, we're moving. We are moving. There was a bee in my shirt. God, I keep getting sidetracked. Yeah, but basically when I started traveling, I felt like all those feelings and all those emotions of being scared and being panicked and being just like not knowing what's going on in my life and feeling like I'm gonna die always it just disappeared when I traveled. And I think it was partly because I didn't have the time to focus on those things. When you're back home, when you're back in a place where you live, you have a lot more time to think about those things. When you're on the road and traveling, there's so many bigger issues happening all the time. So your brain doesn't have the time to focus or to panic on those things. And yeah, I did deal with it sometimes. There were definitely some days that were a little scarier than others, where I would panic or I'd have like onsets of anxiety and the heart palpitations and stuff like that. But relatively, I didn't have time to panic. I didn't have time to be scared. I had time to travel, and it was really remedying me. And in probably 2016, it's probably 2 years into making this YouTube channel, I felt like I had fully healed myself. I felt on top of the world. I felt like legitimately I had I'd moved on past this point in my life. I'd sworn to myself too that I would never go back to being like this, and that I just accepted the fact that this was over. This was a chapter of my life I went through. I had graduated anxiety, panic attacks, and depression. It was over. But as life plays out, I wasn't sure, I didn't know that this is something that people deal with like later on to their lives until recently. I thought it's just something that, you know, younger people deal with and then they get over. The more I've been traveling and talking to people and getting to know people, the more I've been learning that, yeah, anxiety, panic attacks, depression, all that stuff, people deal with it like even later on into their life, and it's very normal. And so, as life is, it came back, it made a resurgence. In 2016, at the end of 2016, and this was all documented on my YouTube channel, but I've never talked about this, not openly. At the end of 2016 in the winter, I flew to have a Euro trip, and on the way from Fort Lauderdale to Copenhagen, on the flight for the first time in years, probably 2 or 3 years at that point, I had gotten this really crazy racing heartbeat on the takeoff of the flight, and then my heart just starts skipping beats like crazy, like more than I'd ever felt before up until that point. And man, just talking about it kind of brings it back. When that happened, I realized that there was an issue, and I think that breaking it down now, I realized that there was a lot of stress built up until that point, a lot of things that I was hoping for to happen, both in the YouTube stuff and stuff like that outside my life. I'd also left a job that I was working full-time at that time. It's just a very scary period. There was a lot riding on that trip out to Europe, and yeah, basically having to deal with all those emotions in one split second that just pop up on you out of nowhere is never easy. And then I started realizing every time I got on a flight, which I did pretty frequently after that, because I am the traveling cloud and I do travel around the world, I would get these crazy racing heartbeats in the beginning of every flight, things that were attributed to anxiety. And I need to clarify, I was traveling around the world for like 2 years prior with no issues, like flying like a champ, never really scared, no issues with that stuff. So it was a bit of a thing to wake up to and all of a sudden understand that you have a fear of flying, or something is built up that is making you scared of the takeoff of an airplane. The reason I'm wearing a heart monitor right now, I'll get into that in a little bit, trust me, but it is a part of it. Essentially, I think the numbers and the social media and the money, and always being in fear of what YouTube is gonna do and what YouTube is gonna change, feeling like I need to really bust my chop to make sure that everything I do is meaningful and is progressing towards something, which is not a normal feeling. You shouldn't always have to feel like that. But feeling like I do have to be like that all the time has caused me to have a really big resurgence in anxiety and panic attacks in my life. Recently, more than ever, particularly in the last year, it's inhibiting me from flying at all, and I'm gonna make a whole video talking about that. But basically, the reason why I've been in the United States for the last year, it's because I've been afraid of hopping on a flight because of these feelings. I suffer from those panic attacks every now and a while. I'm really good at getting them under control, but it's something that I do deal with, and I have been suffering with like this uncontrollable feeling of anxiety and just dread. And it's weird because like 5 years ago, exactly 5 years ago, I was at this point, just different. You know, 5 years ago when I was graduating high school, I was feeling just like this. Almost all the same emotions, but I was in such a different position. Like now I have 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. I have some sort of financial security, not a lot, but I do have some. And life should be good. But something in your brain is telling you this is not enough, or it's not good, or something is wrong. And it's a really frustrating feeling. And so because of that resurgence of the heart palpitations, because of that resurgence of the anxiety and depression, or not depression, I'm definitely not depressed, it's the last thing I am, but panic attacks particularly, I've decided that enough is enough, and I'm really tired of it. I'm very excited for everything that's to come, and I don't want to feel like this. I'm in a place right now, physically in a location around the world, that I can take care of all these things when it comes to checking stuff out at doctors and all that. That's the reason for the heart monitor. I just went to a cardiologist. We're just ruling that everything is 100% okay, but I've already done all the major tests and everything is a-okay. Heart monitor is more of just a regulation thing that they want to make sure 100%, but I've already done all the checkups and I'm a-okay. So really, seriously, no worries, I'm all good. It was more of a dramatic entrance to this video that I wanted to show you guys. Basically, the point that I'm trying to say is I'm ready to get my life back together. I'm ready to not be afraid of flying. I'm ready to not deal with anxiety and depression and all these feelings of the panic attacks. I'm ready to get in control of it again. And I think what's really cool is that I have an audience of people that might be dealing with something similar. I'm assuming that maybe some of you are, because I don't think I'm alone here. So I think it would be cool to show you guys how I deal with it for the second time. I'm stronger now than I was when I dealt with this the first time. I was so insecure and I had no idea about anything back then. But now I'm more educated, I'm stronger minded. I have you guys behind me. So I'm ready to deal with this. I'm ready to deal with this a second time. I'm ready to go head on, and making videos like this is seriously therapeutic for me. It's really, really good because I get to talk about it openly with a bunch of people without rambling too much. I'm basically saying that it's just something that I've dealt with, and I'm excited to make videos documenting that as well. I think so much of the internet has to do with positivity and just good things all the time. Personally, I myself don't ever feel affected by that. I'm not a person who goes onto Instagram or onto YouTube and watches what somebody else's does and feels bad for myself about that stuff. I've never really dealt with that because I'm just not really a jealous person, but I do deal with more irrational fears and stuff that scare me that really make no sense. Whether that's flying or spiders or just random stuff that doesn't really make sense. And I tend to aggravate those things in my brain. I'm a bit of a hypochondriac, so I start thinking of things, have every possible scenario, every possible outcome before it's even the right time to think about those things. So basically this video is announcing that yes, this is something that I deal with, it's something that I've dealt with, it's something that I'm currently dealing with, but we're gonna make it through, and we're gonna make it through big time. This time around, we're gonna get out of this, and we're gonna be champions, we're gonna be a-okay. And I'm really excited to be on the other end of this when it's finally over. And yeah, that's really all I have to say. I was just gonna make a video basically documenting my history. It sucks, it's the worst, I hate it, but I also realize that it could be way worse, and I could be in a way worse position. So I'm grateful that this is really the only thing inhibiting me from living my life is what's in my brain, and it's just something I have to work through. I guess if there's a final point that I wanna make is that if any of you guys are dealing with this, join the journey with me. I'll try to talk about this more openly, even though I don't wanna make every video about this. I'll definitely be making some videos documenting this. If you feel like you're going through something alone, you got me. I'm going through this with you. And maybe even if we're not going through the same thing, we could talk about it. So feel free to hit me up on Instagram if you want to get in my DMs and talk to me about this stuff if you're dealing with something like this. But that's it, guys. That is walk and talk. Sorry I'm so out of breath. It's really hard to walk on sand. If you guys have any ideas as to where I am, comment it down below. And as well, please open up in the comment section. Let's start a discussion about this stuff. If you guys have any feelings on something that I could do to help myself, or ways that you found yourself to deal with anxiety and panic attacks and stuff like that, please comment it down below. Let me know. I'm open and I'm receptive to your comments. I want to hear what you guys have to say about this. So I'm gonna leave you guys there. This is Walk and Talk, fully funded by my patrons on Patreon. If you want to give a subject to talk about, please go on my Patreon. Hey, you can give $1 and then remove it the next month if you want, just to give a topic. Thank you so much to Torben for this amazing topic. I think it was really cool to talk about. And we'll see you guys in the next one. I love you guys a long time. Goodbye, Klats.